So I'm a complete newbie to the Silent Hill franchise. I've always been interested in actually getting into the games and playing through the entirety of the series, but I haven't really been able to, mainly because of the games being kind of difficult to actually get your hands on. Many games are either locked to certain platforms, like Silent Hill 4 The Room being locked to sort of the sixth generation of consoles, and the older games, Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3, their HD remasters back on the 360 were terrible and just horrific ways to actually play the game. So I've always put it off and never really got into the games, which I've always found a bit of a shame to me, but I've always wanted to. Every so often I look on Steam or PlayStation or Xbox to see if these games are there, and they're never there. They've honestly been absent from modern platforms for such a long time. I actually think it's been a detriment to the franchise as a whole. Now, I know some people will say there was a short Silent Hill game that was released on PS5 a little while ago called Silent Hill: The Short Message, but initially I was going to play it, but then I decided to not play it because I wanted my introduction to Silent Hill to be with one of the more renowned games, one of the better ones that are sort of seen by the community as the best games in the franchise. Either Silent Hill 1, 2, or 3 were my picks for the ones I wanted to play first. And the reviews that came out for that game later on did not help its case in any way, shape or form. So when it was announced that a Silent Hill 2 remake was being made by Bloober Team, a team that has sort of experience in the horror genre in general, they're not a top tier team in any way, shape or form, but they know how to make a pretty decent horror game in my opinion. I was genuinely excited for the game overall. Early previews of the game, like trailers, had me a bit worried, but all I have to say is I did pick it up, and Silent Hill 2, the remake, is a masterpiece in the horror genre in all ways a game can be. So first of all, Silent Hill 2 lives and dies by its tight-knit, character-driven story, following a very small group of characters and mainly focusing on James Sunderland and a deep dive into his complex character and the issues he has as a person. And throughout the entire game, you are constantly learning about him and his life and what he did in the past and who he is as a person, and even your actions in the game, they change the narrative itself and create a different character completely. I'm not going to spoil the game, but if you are more friendly towards Maria, a character you meet in the game, the ending plays out significantly different compared to if you play the game slightly differently. Me, I was like following the main objective that was given at the start, find Mary. So I wanted to do this, and this was my main objective, and my ending suited that sort of thing a bit better and actually had a more poetic ending for him as I achieved the leave ending, which I think is actually probably the best ending in terms of story. I don't think it's the happiest ending, I don't think it's the saddest ending, but I think it is the one that makes the most narrative sense for James as a character. And all of this is enhanced so much by the amazing performance by Luke Roberts. He brings to this game, it is honestly top tier, and I can definitely see him winning awards for this performance itself. And it's not just him, everyone in the cast does the best job I've ever seen a game have. This is a game that has voice performances and acting performances that are far and above that of many other games. A particular performance I want to highlight is Angela, played by Gianna Kell, I think it's pronounced, as she was a very big highlight to me, with a side character going way too hard and acted way too well for a character that, while yes, does play a larger part in the story, but she's a side character. She's not meant to be one of the main characters like Maria or James, and these characters are acted so well. I genuinely started to see these characters as real people with their own pasts and problems and fears and everything, and it's just so impressive. And most impressively is Laura, an actual child actor who can act, and she does a great job. Honestly, I could praise each individual voice actor, from Eddie's voice actor to Maria's voice actor herself, but I think you get the point that the voice cast in this game is top notch and is a massive highlight to this game and one of its major strengths. And these performances are significantly enhanced by the story itself, with its very complex themes and honestly oppressive narrative that is hard to get at first, but as you think about it, it makes a lot of sense and it is a really good narrative in general. But I'm not going to spoil it because I genuinely think this is something you need to play yourself. Silent Hill 2 is an old game, the original, and probably older than most people watching this video, as it is older than me. But one thing I'm always scared about remakes is not if they are 100% faithful and play the game the exact way that it was in the original, but that they actually recapture the love and feel that the original creators intended for the game, that lightning in a bottle effect. This was something I was very worried about with something like Resident Evil 4 Remake, because that game was very much lightning in a bottle, and safe to say, remakes in recent years have proven that they can be even better than the original. Resident Evil 2 Remake is better than the original Resident Evil 2 in my opinion. The Resident Evil 4 Remake is better than the original Resident Evil 4 in my opinion. However, Resident Evil 3 is dog shit, so there's that. And yeah, Silent Hill 2 definitely does this. This is very akin to the Resident Evil 2 remake, or more similarly, the Dead Space remake. It's not a massive evolution of the game, but it's a significant improvement, and it expands where the game needs expansion, and I think that's a massive benefit to this game. This remake to me is honestly probably the definitive way to play the game, not only visually, but also gameplay wise. The original Silent Hill 2 was a bit awkward to play, being at a time where 3D controls were not sort of fine-tuned to their way that we like them now, with locked camera angles and sort of older aspects like that, akin to the older Resident Evil games, and this sort of way of making games went all the way up to the GameCube era. So to see them finally go into a full third-person survival game is really cool to see, and it actually enhances Silent Hill 2's horror a lot more. I have seen people say that not having fixed cameras does kind of ruin the game's sort of cinematography, but I hate to say this, cinematography is not that important in gameplay. I find it a lot more annoying than scary when controls are fighting against me, and this is something I've never liked about older Resident Evil games. Personally, the reason I'm not a massive fan of Resident Evil 4, the original one, is mainly its controls. Resident Evil 4 is not a hard game, and the controls were more of an annoyance to me. I already don't like playing shooters with controllers, so to basically create a weird tank control scheme is just annoying, and Silent Hill 2 did have this as well, with sort of awkward controls that sort of locked you in. Now, does Silent Hill 2 Remake significantly improve its controls? Yes, but it actually keeps the awkwardness there. Silent Hill 2 Remake, it doesn't feel like you're a big military guy that can sort of just kill everything. You feel like an actual person who has just sort of come across weapons and is being forced to use them. Aiming is difficult, sluggish, and the centering time takes a while, but it never felt annoying, and honestly, it felt more fun to actually master this combat compared to something like Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 4 Remake. It is not the most complex system in the world for combat, it is relatively simple, but I really do enjoy it. Less is more a lot with games, and the problem when you start adding too much to game systems is that it becomes too complex, and it starts to ruin the actual experience. You see this a lot with newer games with their shooting mechanics where there's too much shit going on, but Silent Hill 2 limits you. There's only 3 guns in the game, and all the guns are used in very specific ways, either to do a serious amount of damage, to stun, or to just generally kill. And I think it's fine. Yes, it's not going to blow you away, and it's nowhere near as good as the Dead Space or Resident Evil remakes in terms of their shooting, but I think it does fine enough for what Silent Hill 2 is going for. And that is, it wants to tie its gameplay more into its narrative than anything else. When you tie the gameplay into narrative, it creates a very tight experience. It enhances every part of the game itself. Ludonarrative dissonance is a big problem with games, and Silent Hill 2 does not suffer with this at all. Everything that you can do in gameplay, you can believe James could do, and I think that's fine. Something like Resident Evil 2, there is a bit of ludonarrative dissonance because Leon, you could go an entire run without getting hit and then in a cutscene get hit, but in Silent Hill 2, you never feel too powerful or too strong. You always feel quite weak against enemies, and I think that's a very good thing, and it makes the game feel so much better to actually experience and actually makes the narrative stronger. However, I will have a problem. Obviously, this is a horror game, and unfortunately, with the combat being survival horror, I very quickly found ways to exploit enemies and basically get guaranteed kills without getting hit. And it basically meant I would start charging straight at enemies with the metal pipe and bonking them to death. And when you start to realize that you can just do that and you become confident in it, this game turns from a horror game into more of a comedy, which, yes, is more me and how I played it, because I just found it funny to sprint at an enemy and just smack him a bunch of times. But you can do that, and the combat is so simple that you very rarely get punished for it because enemies don't really have a way to punish you for doing this. However, again, combined with the oppressive atmosphere, the janky stiff combat, it makes the game actually feel more scary at times, and of course, the amazing sound design actually scared me more than anything this game actually had in it, from visuals to jump scares, even though there's not a lot of them. Random breath noises that you hear in your headset when you're in a dark room that sound like they're behind you, they freaked me out constantly. Random noises down the street that you can't see because of the fog. It's amazing, and it is a textbook example of how to do horror right. This is a horror game through and through. It is not a true survival horror game in my opinion. This game is more horror than survival horror, which I know might seem like a bit of a weird thing to say, but when you look at something like Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 4 Remake, they're more survival horror than horror, because the horror is sort of taking a back seat to the survival part of it. This game puts the horror first and then puts the survival aspects second, which gives it such a fresh feeling compared to the many survival horror remakes we've gotten recently, and it makes the game stand above on its own. And honestly, it's very hard to compare these to other games. If I was to rank this game in terms of my enjoyment compared to, let's go with the three most recent ones, the Dead Space remake, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and the Silent Hill 2 remake, where would I rank them? Well, in terms of gameplay, I prefer both Dead Space and Resident Evil 4 to Silent Hill 2, but I don't like them as much as Silent Hill 2. Yes, I probably like Resident Evil 4 Remake more because it's Resident Evil fucking 4, who doesn't like Resident Evil 4? But Dead Space, I probably don't like it as much as Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 lives and dies by its narrative and characters, while the other two games, they are enhanced significantly by their gameplay. And Silent Hill 2, it's leaps and bounds above these two games in terms of their narrative and characters. Yes, I love Leon, but you can't lie that James is a more complex character that has more to talk about and also think about. And I think that's probably its best part of the game is, again, its narrative that I hope I've reinforced with this sort of review. Also, there is enough new content here to warrant the price tag. I know a lot of people are scared about this game not actually having anything new to it, but there are new endings, which is nice to see, as this game originally had quite a lot of endings for an older game. There are two new endings, which I won't spoil, but every single ending that was in the original has been remade faithfully and are fun ways to replay the game, encouraging New Game Plus. And yes, New Game Plus is here at launch. I don't know why some games make a big deal about adding this. I'm looking mainly at Spider-Man 2, but I feel like I have to praise this because we don't get New Game Plus sometimes in some games. So yeah, it's great that New Game Plus is here, and I probably will replay this game and go for other endings because the game is that good and the endings are that fun to see. Okay, bit rambly, but let's get on to my Croc rating now. What am I going to give this game? Okay, so gameplay, I'm going to give it an 8. Obviously, the actual combat is relatively simple, but something I didn't mention, the puzzles and actually exploring the actual game world are the most enjoyable part of this game. Learning about Silent Hill and the history of it and James himself, and also doing the puzzles are genuinely one of the most fun parts of this game. The simple combat also, it never frustrated me. I never found myself getting annoyed with it like I would something like Resident Evil 1, that remake. However, one thing that did annoy me, that there was a little bit of geometry clipping I noticed when I was climbing on things, and I think that's a bit of an issue that definitely could be fixed. And even when I got stuck on this geometry, a dodge would very quickly fix it. So 8 out of 10, it's a solid game in my opinion. There is nothing wrong with it, and its puzzles are genuinely good puzzles. Story, 10 out of 10. It's a genuine masterpiece in storytelling, and I think is a game story that you need to experience. Content, I'll say a 9. With how many endings there are now, and with the new ones that they've added on top, and the game being expanded in parts, honestly, there is enough game here for you to really get your teeth into and warrant its price. If you want to achieve all endings, it's about 30 hours of gameplay because you need to replay the game a couple times. The game ran me about 12 hours, and I know some people have spent 20 hours, but I play games a bit faster than I think most people, and I often find myself not speedrunning the games, but often I don't find myself sort of standing about and walking. I often find myself moving very quickly through games, and 12 hours is very good for a survival horror game. Music, 8 out of 10. Music is amazing. It fits the game's overall tone and themes, and honestly, there's nothing I would really complain about on the music itself. My only complaint is that there's no music that I would actually like listen to and jam to, so that's why it doesn't get a 10 for me, because there's nothing here that I would actually decide I want to listen to. But it's great music, it fits Silent Hill 2 perfectly, and the music all sounds amazing. Graphics, it's a 10. Like, this game is drop dead gorgeous and it's eye candy. I feel like I've been playing a lot of games recently that are very much eye candy, Space Marine 2 for example, but games seem to keep getting better and better looking, and Silent Hill 2 is a gorgeous game, and I'm very excited to see what we get next from Bloober Team and also Konami in general. Calculating the final Croc rating, it gets a 45 out of 50. Or it gets a very slight 5 out of 5 game. This game is probably the best horror game to do horror that we've ever gotten at this budget. So if you're craving a good horror game this Halloween that will actually creep you out and be a good horror game, not a survival game, horror game, I would really recommend picking it up at full price. It's honestly an amazing game, a clear front runner for me, in my opinion, as a Game of the Year nomination at the moment, and yeah, pick it up. I really do want to see more games like this, and if this does well enough, we might get Silent Hill 1, 3, or 4 remakes, so please pick it up, because I really want more horror games in general. Anyway, that's enough waffling from me. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. See you around. Crocodile.